My name's Simon Cottle. I'm going to talk to you about the metalwork on war memorials and how it might be conserved. I've been working on war memorials for over 14 years. I've experience on working on both the stone and the metal side of it. I originally worked in the sculpture department of the Conservation Centre in Liverpool. I currently work for Rupert Harris, and I'm responsible for the conservation and the maintenance of the statuary that's owned by the City of London Corporation. So I'm going to talk to you about some common problems with metalwork, common forms of deterioration, the effects inappropriate techniques can have on the metalwork, a couple of case studies, and we'll talk a little bit about the importance of maintenance. So bronze is the most common material used on a war memorial. Most of the bronzes are hollow. They can vary in thickness and in quality. Those with lots of casting floors can have holes in, basically from when they're made. Oxidation of the surface of the bronze results in this familiar verdigris colour. And this colour is quite commonplace, especially across Europe. You go to Budapest or Prague or many European cities and all the bronzes are green, and they're quite happy with that. And there's nothing to say that that's wrong. However, the preference in England is to restore it back to its traditional dark brown colour. The green oxidation, it is corrosion, and it is detrimental to the surface. Often people might like the fact that they're green, but what you might find is they get streaky because of the rain. You might find that they end up with black eyes or just streaks running down it, which is, it's not ideal. There's an example here, which is what you might consider a sort of aesthetically pleasing, stable corrosion, whereas this here is what you would call active corrosion. Stable corrosion's a funny thing because you can't actually prove that it's stable. You can presume that it's stable, and you can observe that it's reasonably stable, but you can't prove it's stable. Whereas this here is hard evidence that it is unstable, and that it is actively damaging the bronze. This is an electroform copper, which is very similar to bronze in appearance, but they're made quite differently. As you can see here, the material is very thin. They can be hollow. They can also have a core material inside, which is normally plaster, which isn't particularly tough. So they're quite easily damaged, as can be seen there. They can rip and they can dent quite easily. It's important to know the difference between a bronze and an electrotype, because they're not treated in the same way. These are some of the problems caused by the runoff of metal corrosion products onto the stonework. The soluble copper salts run onto the stonework and can cause serious staining. It is so common, though, that it's become accepted. It's not necessarily a problem. Some people might consider it unsightly, whereas some might not. Rust staining is a little bit more of a problem. It's a little bit more unsightly, as you can see here off this chain. But it's a lot less common, which is a good thing because it's a nightmare to get rid of. Now this is just an example of a kind of unusual case that we might come across. I don't know what the conservation programme is for this. It's a particularly difficult case. It's a standard 10.5 centimetre L45 calibre gun deck from a First World War U-boat. I believe it's in Chepstow. Now you can maintain iron by painting it, but if you've got an internal iron mechanism of any structure and it's outdoors, you're not going to be able to save it. It's going to deteriorate. I've no idea what they're doing to this, and in some ways that's probably for the best. So theft and vandalism. Theft of bronze is unfortunately quite common. It's very hard to prevent the targeted theft. If they've got the technical know-how and they really want to steal it, they can. There's not a lot you can do to prevent them. However, you can protect against opportunist theft. So this cross here, this was stolen because it would have been loose. It would have been loose because the fixings have deteriorated. And when you have iron fixings into a piece of bronze, you get bimetallic corrosion at the junction between the two, and it's the iron that deteriorates. So hence the fixings fail. So what we recommend really is anything that's loose is just to have it checked out and ideally refixed. In regards to graffiti, for metalwork, it's not really a problem. It looks awful in the first instance, but you'd be hard pressed to damage a piece of bronze with graffiti, especially if it's got a wax coating on it. So now I've got some examples of incorrect treatments. I don't know where this is. I believe it's in a church. And this is an example of what happens when you have well-meaning but misinformed people attempting to care for the monuments. Apparently they'd used a combination of lemon juice and salt, which rumour has it was something they used to use on How Clean Is Your House. Now, I haven't seen that, but I know that lemon juice and salt both independently would be bad news for the bronze, for the copper or brass. I can't even tell what it is. But we didn't treat this one. It was just an example of how it can go quite badly wrong. It appears to be covered in a mixture of copper salts. So polished brass memorials would often be lacquered to prevent the surface tarnishing. When a lacquer is intact, there's no need for the memorial to be cleaned other than a light dusting. The lacquer should prevent the need for cleaning. The use of brass cleaning techniques, such as liquid polishes or abrasive cleaners, will remove the delicate lacquer. So removal of the lacquer will result in the brass tarnishing, which can be seen in this instance here. You can see where they've wiped something across the surface. In many cases of lacquered plaques, the techniques that are used to remove tarnish are actually removing the lacquer and becoming the reason for the tarnish. Another scenario you might have is that you get a small patch of tarnish appearing through a lacquer where the lacquer's failed in a small spot, and then somebody attempts to clean brass in an abrasive way with a traditional brass cleaner, but they just remove all the lacquer and then the whole thing will tarnish. Another thing that you look out for as well is if you've got a lacquered surface which is scratched, you end up with this terrible preferential corrosion within the scratches. This isn't actually on a war mural, it's actually on a Henry Moore sculpture. The yellow is the colour that it should be, and this is where people have scratched through and you get corrosion in the scratched areas. Now if you were to remove the lacquer and remove the corrosion, you'd still be left with the graffiti because it etches its way into the surface. So as soon as the lacquer is damaged, especially by graffiti, we recommend having it treated. So this isn't particularly common nowadays, but there was a trend of painting bronzes to look like bronze, which is what they've done here. It's not a recognised way of conserving a bronze, and it's likely it was a sort of well-meaning attempt at restoring it. In the past, they wouldn't have known how to restore a bronze, or it would have been knowledge that was quite hard to come by. And in the eyes of the public, they may well have done a great job of this. They might have had an awful green streaky monument and all of a sudden it looks like bronze, and they may be quite pleased. From a conservator's point of view, the finish is incorrect though. It's not true to the original material. The finish of a well-patinated bronze has much more depth and variation in colour. A painted surface, it appears flat and plastic-like. There's no real way of telling the difference between a fiberglass and a bronze. As soon as you painted it, they look like the same thing. In regards to preservation, the paint may well be doing a good job. It is a surface coating, it's protecting the elements from getting to the copper. It may well be preventing deterioration, but you don't really know because you can't see what's going on. It's also largely reversible as well. One of the problems you might have though is if the bronze surface was prepared by an abrasive cleaning method before it was painted. So any good painter will want to blast clean the metalwork that he's about to paint. And if that's the case, then it can be very detrimental to the bronze. Now this is a little bit off subject, but it's just an example of the kind of unusual locations you might find a war memorial in. I believe this is in a post office, probably in a sorting office. I think the guys, they would have worked in this particular place, and it would have been paid for by subscription by his employees. So as much as it's not a pretty picture, who's to say that the moral shouldn't be there? And from a conservation point of view, I wouldn't be particularly worried about it. I don't think it's going to get stolen. I don't think it's going to get damaged by the public or by anyone. Okay, this is a case study we're going to look at, which is the London Troops Memorial. It's outside, it's at Bank Junction in London. These are the steps to the Royal Exchange. You would have the Bank of England on this side here. It's cared for by the City of London Corporation. It was previously in a poor state of repair in regards to the bronzes. I'm going to go through a little bit the conservation of the bronze and then how the memorial is used and also how we maintain it. It's of quite high quality in regards to both the stone and the bronze. It's in a quite unique environment. In some ways you think it was a good environment for a monument in some ways. It's incredibly safe, so you wouldn't expect it to get stolen. It's looked after by a very wealthy local authority. However, it does have its own special environmental impacts, such as the protests, which I don't believe damaged the sculpture, but in regards to care of the sculpture, it is a special case. Like many central London monuments, the level of pollutants are quite high, and there is quite a high pigeon population, although I believe the city do quite a good job of keeping the population down. On Remembrance Sunday, it is a very well attended ceremony with thousands of people, and just on a daily basis, you can see here, this is the entrance to Bank Tube Station, which is one of the busiest tube stations in London, and there is absolutely no protection around the monument. There's not even any steps around the bottom, so you can easily brush past it. In fact, there'll be hundreds of people brushing past it on a daily basis. Now, this comes back to the discussion earlier about wreath hanging systems. What they have is these quite nice embossed bronze, I don't know what you call them, wreath holders we call them. The symbol is to do the London Troops with the cross rifles. You can see here there was a previous system. The City of London are quite good at getting to grips with problems like this. And I'm not sure how long these have been here, but we feel it's quite a sensitive method of allowing the wreaths to be hung. There are 30 to 40 wreaths get hung every year. And to accommodate them, they came up with these high quality wreath holding bronze things. And then what they also do is install a chain. And the chain is hung between the wreaths with like a plastic tie, so as not to damage the bronze. And then the wreaths are attached onto the chain or onto the hooks. Now they employ us to do this for them. So a conservator will install the chain. On the day of the ceremony, the conservator will attach the wreaths to make sure they're all held on correctly. You get all kinds of systems for attaching wreaths. Everyone's different. Some people, they like to jam a coat hanger inside them and then hang it on the hook. So we turn up after the ceremony, we take away all the things that we think aren't appropriate for a war memorial and replace them with an appropriate system. So we realise that not every local authority has the money to do this. It's a really good example by the City of London that they employ a conservation professional to do anything in regards to the memorial, even if that's just installing and removing the wreath chain. So this is the bronze before treatment. Now I realise you can get a lot worse condition bronzes. This is an example of, throughout the late 20th century, a policy widely adopted in London and other cities to treat the bronzes with a black wax that contained lanolin. Now, whilst it's now known to be incorrect, this wax treatment did afford protection to the metal, and the wax prevented exposure to the elements, and this did reduce the rate of corrosion forming. However, something to bear in mind is that they were green before they were waxed, so they would have had a streaky green corrosion coverage. because they didn't look great, they waxed them, they put black wax on them. So when you remove this black wax, you've got to expect the green to be underneath. The general appearance is a very dull black finish with green areas coming through. That's kind of what you'd expect from a bronze of this age that hasn't been treated. The old wax is removed with a steam cleaning system. We use systems such as a DOF or a Thermotech, the same as you'd use on the stonework, although you probably use it at a higher pressure. And you can see here that it will remove the black wax and it will also remove the corrosion to a point. Some corrosion it won't remove, however in this case it came quite good and a lot of the corrosion is gone. Not all of it, but most of it. You certainly wouldn't say that there was any active corrosion on there. The steam cleaning, it won't damage the bronze. It won't damage the surface of the bronze. One thing it might do is pull a patina off. So you'd have to be a little bit careful when you're agreeing the cleaning level that you're not stripping the inappropriate coatings off, but also the historic patina. You must also take care with the large amounts of water that might be generated by this kind of treatment. You have to know where the water's going and make sure it's not causing any damage to the stonework. So following the steam cleaning, we do a light patination. You've got the before, and this is after patination and after waxing. We use traditional patination techniques and use them selectively, only where it's required. It creates a real depth of colour. You've got a real range of browns in there, browns through to black. You also get some of greens coming through as well, which will be some of the residual corrosion left over from the cleaning process. But you don't have to remove all the corrosion to patina a bronze. You can patina brown on top of green if you know what you're doing, and if it's the right kind of green. It's kind of complicated. On top of the patina, we put clear microcrystalline wax, which is then warmed in with a blowtorch. You put several layers of the wax on. You build it up to the layer that you're happy that it's protected to sufficiently, but also that it looks right and that you can get the correct sheen on it. The cool wax is then buffed to a desired level. And it's when you buff the wax that you start to really bring out the depth in the patina, and that's how you see the quality in a piece of bronze. So I'm going to come back to London Troops. I just wanted to discuss this example. This is the Burgess Hill War Memorial. As you can guess, this is before treatment, and this is the treatment that they opted for. They decided not to patinate the bronze. However, they wanted to wax the bronze. There are two ways of waxing. You can cold wax or you can hot wax. If you were to cold wax this, it wouldn't change the colour. The water would run off. It would offer a certain amount of protection, but it wouldn't look any different. If you hot wax it, it enhances the protection that the wax offers because it gets absorbed into the corrosion, and it offers a much higher level of protection. However, it darkens the surface. It makes it look wet. So what you've got here is it's a kind of halfway solution. It's not the traditional brown, and it's not an unrestored green that people are used to. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm not particularly in favour of it personally. It's not really for me to say, but I can see why they might have decided on this, because patination isn't entirely reversible. By the time if you would have cleaned this thoroughly and patinaed it brown, you couldn't revert it back to this without leaving it outside for 10 years. Whereas this now, if you were to steam clean off the wax, you could bring it back to this, but I don't know why you would. So I feel like they could have gone a little bit further and restored it to something that people are used to seeing and that people would expect. Instead of light green bronzes and restored dark brown bronzes, you now have this new category of dark green bronzes. It's an interesting talking point. There's no rights or wrongs, but that is something worth considering if you're ever specifying the restoration of a bronze. Okay, going back to London troops. There are two inscriptions on two sides. One in great condition, the other one in poor condition. I've got no reason to think that they were done at different times. You can see here what these are lead inscriptions in Portland stone. You can see the quality there. The stone shows very little sign of deterioration. The letters are perfectly intact. And here you can see that the stone has deteriorated so much that we presume that lead letters were on this stone, but it deteriorated to such an extent that the lead letters fell away. You can see by these little tiny holes, these are the kind of holes that would be behind this lead lettering. The only reason I can think for this is that it was a poorer quality piece of stone, but the problem it's presented is quite tricky. What they've done is replaced it with these brass replacements. Now they suffer the same problem. The quality is not quite up to scratch, and placing these onto a rough stone surface hasn't given a particularly satisfactory result. The quality isn't quite there. I'm not quite sure how old they are, but we feel it's something that we could improve on. So, another problem we have with this monument is the gun strap. Now, persistent vandalism of the gun strap. It's been stolen twice and deliberately damaged on numerous occasions over the last 15 years. What we found was that people would swing on the gun strap and it would break at this fixing point here. Every time we reaffixed the strap to the bronze using traditional metalwork techniques, it would get broken again and would further damage the gun. So after a while, what we came up, because it just kept happening, we're not quite sure the reasons behind it. Maybe somebody's got some personal reason to dislike this memorial for whatever reason. But we found that instead of refixing to the metalwork each time, what we would do is attach it with a nylon cable tie, which this is 3 meters off the ground. So from the ground, you cannot see this. Someone would have to point it out to you for you to notice. And what we found was that people would swing on it, the cable tie would snap, which is what we wanted. Within hours, it would be reported to the City of London. We would go back down and we would refix it. So we found it was a good enough way to sort of deal with the problem that we were being faced with. Quite a unique problem. Something that I should mention is that since I wrote this, I haven't changed it. It has since been stolen in its entirety. The whole strap's been nicked. So we'll be making a new one shortly. Although whether we'll go back to this method, I'm not entirely sure. We might have to come up with another solution. So some of the maintenance challenges for this monument are same as many really. Pigeon guano is the main one. However, it affects the stone much worse than it affects the metal. If the bronze is waxed and the wax is in good condition, the bronze should not deteriorate, no matter how much guano is on it. The bronze is hot waxed once a year where required. Excess wax or wax that has deteriorated due to age or pollutants will be removed and replaced. The traffic pollution that can build up on the surface of the wax in time is absorbed into it. Wax that's been exposed to pollution for numerous years can become black in colour, and when removed with a solvent it's clearly visible. We sometimes find that a bronze that's gone darker over the years is because the wax is absorbing pollution out of the air, and if we remove that wax with solvents or steam, replace it with a clear wax, it brings more life out of the bronze, generally lightens it in colour, and you can see more depth in the bronze. There's been a bit of a trend over recent years for using coloured waxes on bronze. Now, although there are not many negative effects, there's certainly no negative effects to the bronze, it's not really recommended. It's normally a shortcut to a patinated effect on bronze. It's not dissimilar to painting a bronze. It's not being true to it. What you should see in a bronze is you should see the patina and not a coloured wax. What you might find is that foundry workers or conservators, they might sort of try and enhance a bronze by using waxes. Particularly they'll put black wax in the undercuts and the shadows. But what you'll find is that a few years later another conservator will come along who doesn't know what's happened, and they'll just end up moving the black wax around the surface of the bronze. If we need detergents for issues like this, which we sometimes do, it's always kept to a minimum. We try not to use a treatment on the bronze that we couldn't use on the stone. So if we were to use detergent on the line here, you're effectively washing this area too. And in this instance, we can't mask this off. Not easily. If you bear in mind, this is the way we carry out maintenance conservation. You can't mask off the areas below. So we have to be selective in our use of detergents because of the effect that it will have on the stone below. Okay, here's another example, which I think is in the new advice notes that have just been published. I'm just going to talk briefly about what we did to it. This is the Bootle War Memorial in Liverpool. This is a bronze that had been painted. They've done a really good job of painting it. They'd put a thick layer of primer on, which you can just see, which is the grey, and then a thick layer of black paint on top of. I think the surface had been blasted. So this area here is corrosion that's come about because the paint has failed. So we used a water-based paint stripper to soften the paint and used pressurized steam to remove it. There was a gun strap missing off this soldier. Seems to be a bit of a common theme. This, however, was different in its construction. The one on the London troops was made of copper. This is actually made of cast bronze. It's quite heavy in the section. Originally, when it was made, they wouldn't have had welding techniques, so they wouldn't have been able to, when they attached it at this point, it would have been quite weak. And we believe that's the reason it came away. And so, in this instance, when we had a new bronze strap, which we modelled off old photographs, we decided, in this instance, to weld it to the historic bronze. Now, it's not a decision to be taken lightly because welding is irreversible. However, we thought it was the only way we could prevent it getting stolen. Any other method of attaching it would largely be considered irreversible anyway and would probably not be strong enough. This here is a good example of the before and after treatment as well. This having a restored brown patina and 3 coats of clear wax. Another issue we had here, which is similar to the gun strap on the London troops, is that there was a missing bayonet. So this is how it was found. This is a bayonet that we made from historic images and had cast in bronze. The local council were aware that this was probably going to get stolen if it was put on the monument. There was no way of attaching it effectively and having it, it could have been welded on at this point, but we feel like it wouldn't have just looked quite right the way it's made. We also figured it was a little bit too much of a trophy as well. And so what it was decided that we developed a plug system. So the bayonet is actually removable. So when you're having a ceremony, you can put the bayonet on. When the ceremony is finished, you can take the bayonet away. The strap on the London Troops Memorial we may well be proposing a similar sort of thing to this. And that if someone is just going to keep nicking this strap, we just put it on for ceremonies and we'll take it away again. This is just an example of the kind of issues you might come up against when you've got stone conservators and metal conservators not working against each other, but maybe sort of tripping each other up a little bit. We'd finished the bronzes and then the stone conservation carried on a little bit, and we ended up with this, which is, it's only stone dust on the wax surface. It's not a problem. It just needs cleaning off by somebody who sort of knows what they're doing. But that was one of the small issues we came up across. And this is an image of the finished monument. So. Thank you very much.